Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rhythms of Access podcast where we explore the intersection of disability, creativity, and art. As you know, this space celebrates the candid stories of disabled artists who are reshaping the cultural landscape. This episode is brought to you by Blowing the Boundaries and the Canadian Accessible Music Instruments Network, with support from the SHIRK grant, which is the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. Today, we have a very special guest I'd like to introduce to you, Sean Lee, a visionary artist and curator whose practice reframes disability art as the last avant-garde. Sean's work explores crip horizons, access aesthetics, and how disability disrupts and transforms art making. From curating groundbreaking exhibitions to serving as director of programming of Tangled Art and Disability, Sean's career has been a rich tapestry of innovation, advocacy, and radical imagination. So I welcome everyone, Sean Lee. Sean, so
Hi,
good to
Ken.
have you.
Thank you so much for this lovely invitation. I'm so excited to be here today.
I'm so excited as well. Like this has been a long time coming, and I'm so glad that you were able to make the time and to join us here and just to share about your journey as an artist and how that has been like for you, all the highs and lows. So yeah, I'm really excited. Um, yeah, before we jump right in, I like for people to get to know you a little bit more personally. So I like to play a little like game, an icebreaker question that gives people a little bit of an insight of your personality, your vibe, and such. So I have a question for you. If you could create your dream exhibition with any artists, living or dead, who would you feature and why?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a tough question too, actually, because there's so many
Mhm.
incredible artists that I wanted to work with. Actually, I feel like I've done my dream exhibition a couple of times now, and what I'm
Mm.
really dreaming of right now is more space, less so specific artists, but actually what I'm finding is that I'd like to bring multiple stories, multiple people, almost contradicting stories and contradicting perspectives into a space together. Because I think that's what's really exciting, and what's also missing sometimes is
Yeah.
that we don't all share a single experience of disability, right? Disability is very
Yeah.
much not monolithic.
Yeah.
But even when it comes to, stories about ableism, stories about, the experience of disability, we
Mm.
all experience it in very different ways. Some folks are just starting out in their disability journey. Some folks have been born with disability or have come to terms with it in really interesting or really provocative or really deep ways. I'm
Mm.
finding that, that space is oftentimes a limiting factor for me in being able to bring all these stories together. And so,
Yeah.
for me, I'd like, a really grand space. I'm thinking, Venice Biennial. The Venice Biennale is this, it's a biennial, so it happens once every 2 years. It's sort of like the
Okay.
biggest art exhibition that happens
Huh.
publicly. And I'd love to do a show there one day. So I may be skirting your
Wow.
question around the who and instead thinking the where and the what.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. But what about dream artists? Okay, so that I know you're saying it's a bit hard to choose one. Let me make it a bit easier for you. Let's say top three.
Okay, top three. So Yinka Shonobare is an artist who I greatly, greatly respect. He's somebody that I would
Hmm.
love to work with. I've done a couple of programs where I've been able to have the privilege of being in kind of the same space as him. But
Okay.
Yinka is an award-winning, incredible artist. He's based in the UK.
Okay.
And so it's there's geographical distance as well that separates
Hmm.
us, but also Yinka is just so incredible. He's the one who originally coined the word this idea of disability arts as the last avant-garde. So Yinka
Oh,
Shonogare would be very, very high up on my
okay.
list. Another artist from the past who I'd love to work with is Jeff McMurtry. Jeff is a trailblazing artist, or was a trailblazing artist from the disability community. And Jeff actually can be credited with, if not the actual creation, but like the co-creation or the co-founding
Hmm.
of a lot of major disability arts organizations in here in so-called Canada. I
Hmm.
never really got the chance to meet Jeff McMurtry around the same time that he passed away. It was kind of when I was beginning
Hmm.
my journey into disability arts.
Okay.
So he would be definitely another artist that I greatly admire and would love to work with. And
Hmm.
then finally, another artist that who I've been sort of collaborating with recently, but haven't had the chance to work with yet, is Yo-Yo Lin. And Yo-Yo
Okay.
is a New York-based artist, an incredible East Asian disabled artist who Yo-Yo and I share some similarities in terms of the experience of disability. And so she
Hmm.
creates these really beautiful soundscapes using the cracks and the kind of different sounds that happen from her body.
Hmm.
She does these really interesting remixes. And she's definitely an artist that I would love to work with. So,
Wow.
it was hard to narrow it down, but as
I
I was
see
saying,
that.
three really surfaced recently.
I see one. I see one. No, that's great. That's great. So it looks like you've had quite an influence. Like you've kind of received a lot of inspiration and influence from these great artists who have like intersecting identities as you. And with that, I'm curious to know what first drew you to the arts? Like, when did disability become central to your creative and curatorial practice?
Yeah, so I have to admit that well, I guess it's sort of two questions. There's the question of disability entering into like my arts practice, and then also
Mhm.
what drew me sort of to art. And I think
Yeah.
actually what I can really say is that um, when when I was looking into art, I was actually starting off in my field really interested in fashion because I think
Okay.
fashion has some really unique ways that play with the body. It's about living essentially. It's about authoring the way that others can perceive you. And as somebody with
Mm.
a visible disability, as somebody for which clothes have never completely fit or felt very very much like they were built for me, I've spent a
Mm.
lot of time delving into fashion, delving into kind of how I can crip a fashion sensibility for myself. I'm
Hmm.
using crip, as a reclaimed word, as a term that disability scholar Kelly Fritsch
Mhm.
uses as a verb, which is like to open with desire for the way that disability disrupts. And I've always thought
Hmm.
about fashion as having this like incredible disruptive potential when it comes to how it is that people perceive the aesthetics of beauty. And so for
Hmm.
me, fashion was kind of like a really interesting place that I wanted to dive into. But I did a
Hmm.
couple of fashion internships, small gigs, And I quickly realized that fashion is also very like it's a commercial practice, and so to bring yourself into a sort of successful fashion um like career is really difficult. It's not
Okay.
impossible. Certainly folks have done it. But it made me realize that like I was interested in the marketing and the PR side of things in fashion, and it didn't line up very well with what I actually
Mm,
wanted to do. And I had put myself into an arts management program, and
mhm,
there I was learning more and more about kind of grassroots arts programs. And I was in the studio department learning about all these different arts movements and arts practices. And I became really interested in studio art myself, and
mhm,
really about the like communal aspects of art making. And so
mm,
I ended up becoming really interested in performance art. And performance art, oftentimes it's using the body as a tool, right? And
okay.
what I kept noticing was that performance artists are often naked. They're often working without clothes, because working without clothes help to try to take away from this idea of, you know, what they're wearing influencing the meaning of the work. And so it's meant
Mm,
to you know, back then signify like an unread body. But oftentimes
mhm,
these bodies were you know, usually white, able-bodied, aesthetically pleasing in a kind of a very kind of typical good-looking
mhm,
body. And so it made me wonder, like, how do I fit in as somebody who's
mm,
racialized, as somebody who's queer, as somebody who's visibly disabled? Like, how do I use my body as a
yeah.
media without it being, or like not necessarily that I didn't want it to be read as disabled, but that it changes the way that performance gets read then if I'm doing a performance versus if someone else is doing it. And so that's what really
Gotcha.
like that's what kind of um, started that journey into disability arts.
Mm,
Learning more about disability arts as a movement was really interesting, because at school I was getting taught about, you know, the lots of different arts movements that exist, like
mhm,
the queer arts movements, feminist arts movements, black arts movements. Like all of these movements were these wonderful social vehicles for change. And yet I always felt that when I was researching or doing any sort of um, like trying to find disabled artists, that
mhm,
work was always instead relegated to a more charitable way of understanding identity. And so I didn't want that. Like I didn't want that. So I
yeah.
was really interested in trying to push against that narrative. And in doing so, I really found disability community through this art making. And that's why I continue to do this work, is that like uh,
Mm,
disability arts helped me find who I am, but also who
wow.
the community is, as kind of cheesy as
Ooh,
it sounds.
that's very powerful right there. Yeah.
And so I guess in my work, I'm trying to pay that forward and trying to help to
Mm,
continue to push the disability arts community forward, to help the disability arts movement thrive, and to invite others into disability
yeah.
arts the same way that I kind of ended up in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I noticed within your work, you always describe disability art as the last avant-garde. I know you made reference to that artist that's based in the UK as the one who coined this term. Um, so describing disability as the last avant-garde and referencing the idea of crip horizon in air quotes. Do you want to explain for everyone who might not know what these concepts are, like what do they mean and how they actually shape your practice, your work? Like what does last avant-garde mean? What does crip horizon mean? Just for people to get a good sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love that 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 phrase that Yinka coined, right? That
Mhm,
disability arts is the last avant-garde, because I think it simultaneously places the disability arts movement sort of within the natural trajectory of how the arts, the larger arts ecology is working. These
mhm,
movements that bubble up and help to change and shape our understanding of arts and culture more broadly, but it also simultaneously takes us out of those same sort of standard flattened ways of understanding art making, and instead it's like it's about trying to show us that the art world still doesn't understand disability arts. It still needs us
mhm,
as disabled artists to continue to help shape an arts movement that includes and welcomes disability. And oftentimes, these practices include things like accessible curation, thinking about
mhm,
access really as not just this logistical means to an end,
mhm,
but actually that access has meaning and access can be beautiful. Access can help us to understand and engage with art differently.
mhm,
So there's a disability arts curator in the U.S. named Amanda Kachia. Amanda Kashia. Amanda, uh, within this idea of accessible curation, coined this phrase called creative access. And I love
mhm,
creative access because it tells us that access can be both practical but creative at the same time. That when an
mhm,
artist is making an artwork, it's not just that the art is meant to be experienced visually. That art can be experienced in different ways and can be experienced in multiple ways, so that it becomes a more inclusive but also a more dynamic experience. I've worked with
mhm,
artists who, for instance, started off with a very two-dimensional practice. Maybe it was drawing or
mhm,
painting, and helping to introduce them not only to accessible curation, but helping bring them into disability community has really helped them to expand their practice beyond just their own medium too, right? It's so
right,
great that access can actually mean the creation of more art or different art
mhm,
or different ways of working that artists maybe hadn't been considering before. And so I think that's the
mhm,
avant-garde part of our disability arts community, in that we are, reclaiming space. We are we as disabled artists who historically haven't been invited into the arts community
mhm,
because of things like ableism, because of things like how inaccessible the art sector is. We're
yeah,
instead redefining the terms, our own terms of how to participate in the arts sector. And I think
mhm,
it's radically shifting how we experience arts and culture. More broadly as well, now when people, for instance, go to theaters,
mhm,
it's more expected. It's normalized to have things like
mhm,
relaxed performances
yeah,
where you don't have that sort of stuffy theater etiquette, and instead
yeah,
people can be themselves in a theater performance. Or you come
mhm,
to a museum and there
yeah,
might finally be something that you can touch or an audio guide that you can listen to. And so little things like
mhm,
that are helping to bring the arts movement more broadly into disability
mhm,
community. And what I always say is that people have always perceived that art is good for disability, that like
mhm,
disabled people need art therapy, and that art is this like therapeutic thing that can help mitigate disability. But I actually think
mhm,
it's the other way around. I actually think that
mhm,
disability is good for art, that we as artists, that our practices, that our culture is going to help make the art sector a more welcoming, a more vibrant, and a more creative place. And so
mhm.
that's kind of the last avant-garde. And there,
Interesting.
there's not one single definition of where we go, right?
Yeah.
For instance, there's when you come into the disability community, you start to realize there's conflicting access needs, that people are coming to
Yes.
disability from different places, from different
Yeah.
experiences, from different
Yeah.
ways of understanding things like pride. And so there's not really one disability art movement. There's multiple. And so
Mhm.
I thought of that word crip horizon because it's meant to be a horizon that you never get to. You never get a
Ooh.
fully accessible art world. You never get a fully
Hmm.
non-ableist art world. It's as long as ableism exists, we can't
Yeah.
have a fully accessible art sector. And so
Right.
Crip Horizon is about how we are always moving forward. We're always striving towards these different futures
Hmm.
that are just kind of out of reach, but we're always moving towards it, you know?
Hmm. Interesting. Thank you. Thank you for that. I know that collaboration is key to the work that you do. What have been some of the most rewarding collaborations that you've had, and what makes those partnerships so impactful?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the most meaningful kind of collaborations for me have been the ones where we learn from one another and something new comes out of it. I mean, I've had incredible collaborations, for instance, with um, David Bobier from Vibrofusion
Yes,
in London.
yes, love that guy.
So incredible. Yeah, you know
Yeah,
David. The
yeah,
work he does is so great because he not only helps to just kind of turn audio and music and sound-based work into vibrational, kind of responsive,
tactile. Yeah,
yeah, tactile haptics, right? But instead, he's helping us to think about sound differently. And
mm,
working with David is always just such a joy because I learn a bunch from him, and
yeah,
I think as well, he always says that he learns a lot from us, and I think that's really like, that collaboration is something really
mm,
incredible. Um,
mm,
another really wonderful collaboration that happened was back in 2019. I worked with an artist and curator named Gloria C. Swain, who helped me to continue to unpack the ableism that exists in the arts sector. You know, Gloria was
mm,
curating a group of artists, and one of the artists wasn't able to make it to any of the prep meetings, wasn't able to attend any sort of meetings where we were trying to prepare for the show, and ultimately decided they wanted to withdraw from the exhibition. And Gloria came to me and said, like, okay, do I have to replace this artist? What kind of happens now? And we thought about it together, and we said there's nothing that says you have to replace that artist. Gloria
mm,
ended up wanting to instead hold space for this artist, and she held an empty wall. She ended up writing a bit of text about how the art sector more broadly has always been kind of inaccessible, especially to
mm,
racialized BIPOC artists and also to disabled artists. And so at that intersection, it makes it incredibly difficult for, BIPOC disabled artists to enter into this sector. And so that
mm,
wall held space for them. But it also made me realize that even though we are a space that tries to build access into everything we do, um, there are going to be times where artists simply can't participate in an exhibition. And we also
mm,
are constrained to some of the same kind of um, that same industrial complex of the art world that churns exhibitions out. So as much as we try
mhm.
to build access in, there's a certain degree to which we also can't mitigate that. And so we
Yeah,
started putting into our contracts a care clause. Our executive director, Sin Roseboom, wrote this beautiful kind of clause addendum kind of thing into our contracts that said
yeah,
essentially like, yeah, whatever's been written into a contract does not get superseded by the health and well-being of an artist that's working with us. And so, that was kind of part of the permission that we've been trying to give everyone to relax their ways of working, to bring themselves wholly into a space. If something doesn't happen for a show that we said would happen, would that we said we would do, that's not the end of the world. If something's not ready for the opening, you can still do it after the opening has happened. Those are the things that we've tried to
Yeah.
continue to do, and that I continue to learn with artists, that I continue to learn with other curators, all from the disability community, about how to continue to build better practices. Those are the kind of collaborations that are the most rich to me. It's like we learn from one another's practices. We learn how to support one another because we're coming from different disability communities, different lived experiences, and so there's always
Absolutely.
some friction, but we also need to learn to mobilize as a group. And so bringing
Yeah.
ourselves fully into a space is sort of that first step, I think.
Yeah. I also realize, like, within the collaborations that you may have, um, as you're talking, like, things might not go as smoothly as like what the artist has set out to do. What barriers have you faced as a disabled artist, and how have you turned those challenging moments into triumphant moments?
Yeah, I mean, I've usually tried to channel them into art. um,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, this kind of brings me back to my own practice a little bit, but
Yeah.
when I was growing up, the thing that I was kind of told the most was that my body was different, that my body was going to have issues, struggles, and as somebody visibly disabled from birth, um, my back curves. I'm missing some ribs. I have different kinds of bumps all over my body, and I'm short. But it's all been stuff that, if it wasn't for a social recognition of what is acceptable, what is okay to look like, I don't know that my disability would have affected me that much. Like yes, I had annual surgeries to help support breathing and stuff like that. But I really didn't feel all that different, except when others told me I was different, right? And this was especially pronounced when I became older and queerness kind of entered the picture and puberty entered the picture,
Yeah.
and suddenly I realized I didn't really know disability. I didn't know my own body outside of the sort of medical field that I'd been ultimately indoctrinated with.
Yeah.
Like our default understanding of disability, even as disabled people, is usually the medical model, right? That's the
Yeah.
model we are sort of grow up in, and it
Yeah.
isn't until we start to glean and claim disability that we realize the medical model is flawed in the ways that it is, and that there are other ways to understand disability. And so channeling that into things like performance, into installation work, into my curation work, has really been my way of kind of mitigating the social ways that my disability has impacted my life. And ultimately, I now see my disability in a really in a positive light. I can proudly represent myself as a disabled person, and that doesn't mean that disability is easy in any means, and that there aren't moments where disability doesn't have very real impacts on what I can and can't do. But it also has had gifts that it's given me in terms of the community I met and the ways that I work and the art that I've experienced. And so that's really the way that I've kind of um, reconciled my disability identity, has been um, through art, and it's allowed me to gain a sense of love for disability that I probably wouldn't have been able to build only understanding it through the medical model.
Hmm. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. With that understanding of like your identity as a person with a disability and as your identity as a um, disabled artist, what advice would you give to up and coming disabled artists and curators who are looking to like make their mark in the art world?
Oh yeah. I mean, be bold and be fearless,
Hmm.
and be unapologetic. I think a lot of people try to shrink themselves to fit into boxes in order to get their first opportunity in the art world, or they try not to agitate so that they can have that first opportunity and be get the approval of people in the arts industry. But I actually think that the road we travel towards the crip horizon is one where we're agitating, and one where we're disrupting, and one where that disability is unapologetically um, disrupting the ways that we understand
Hmm.
the arts and culture sector. I
Hmm.
really think that it's also about finding community. It's also about,
Yeah.
not trying to work in that sort of outdated idea of like a solo artist working alone, trying to do everything by themselves. Like interdependence is like the lifeblood of disability community. It helps all of us stay present and grounded and in community with one another. So we need interdependence. Don't try to do everything alone.
Hmm.
Those are really the biggest things, and also that we have to keep learning and unlearning. We
Hmm.
get told that access is this flattened checkbox, and what I've learned through accessible curation and through creative access and through like the conflicting access needs that come up when I work with various different artists is that we have to keep thinking of access as something fluid, as something that's
Hmm.
ongoing and living. That's really important too. Um, yeah, I think that's my
Hmm.
advice: is be bold, be unapologetic, and find community.
Be bold, be unapologetic, and find community. I like that. Speaking about being bold, I know 2025 is shaping up to be another big year for you. Can you tell us about your upcoming projects, collaborations, or any cool initiatives that are on the horizon?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just had a really cool partnership that opened in Richmond, BC. We had an
Mhm.
artist, Persimmon Blackbridge, who's a long time disabled artist. She's been working for over 50 years, long before disability arts was recognized, and she's got a solo show in Richmond, BC, about the intersection of climate and disability justice. So that's a really cool partnership that just happened. But further down the line, we actually have our 10-year anniversary coming up, and
Wow.
so we're doing a lot of prep work for a sort of 10-year, not retrospective, but like a survey of some of the things that have happened. Obviously, it can't be a complete one, but a little survey of Tangled's work that we've done before. And that's going to be in partnership in the UK with the Canadian Embassy. So we're
Hmm.
really excited for this sort of 10-year anniversary show that we're going to put on. And as always, we've got really cool exhibitions happening, collaborations that happen. I think this year we might be doing something with Nuit Blanche. Nothing's
Okay.
confirmed, so I don't want to give
Okay.
it away. But
Okay.
some really cool stuff down the line.
Wow. Love it. I love it. Any last words before we close off? How can people follow you and your work? Yeah, just let us know any socials
Yes.
that we can include in the description.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tangled has exhibitions running year round. So please, if
Mm,
you're in Toronto, please come visit us in person. We're Tangled Art Gallery, Suite 124 at the 401 Richmond building. 401
mm,
Richmond is a wonderful arts hub full of artist run centers and really cool arts organizations. So, definitely a great place to check out. And if you
yeah.
can't physically come by, we also have remote options for attending the gallery. So you can
Mm,
book a free remote tour or a free kind of self-guided robot kind of tour where you can drive around the gallery through this
wow.
robot and check out the shows. So feel free to book those. Those are just on our website at tangledarts.org under the Visit Us profile. And follow us on social media. We have our Instagram account, which is just tangled underscore arts. Yeah, would love for folks to who haven't been to our space before to come check us out. And for folks who have, of course, always keep coming by. So great to continue to um, uh, have people be excited about the work that we're doing.
I love that. I love it. Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I feel like I could be talking to you for a long time. Every time I'm talking to you, it's like I'm peeling an onion, there's so many layers of you and such a big wealth of knowledge that you're always
Yeah,
so
yeah.
willing to impart.
It's
So
this has just been the first layer. So well, we'll
there you
definitely
go.
do something again one day.
Absolutely. So, key takeaways for everyone from Sean Lee: be bold, be unapologetic, and build community. If there's anything that you took out of this episode, please take this with you. Be bold, be unapologetic, and build community in whatever artistic practices that you do, or even non artistic practices, whatever initiatives that you are a part of. Be bold, be unapologetic, and be you and build a community. Thank you, Sean. We'll see everyone in the next episode. Take care.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care,
Bye
everyone.
bye.
Bye.